It was a cold, quiet evening in a small town where everyone seemed to be in a hurry to get home. The streets were mostly empty except for a few cars passing by and the occasional pedestrian bundled in thick coats. One man walked slowly along the sidewalk, his steps careful and thoughtful. He was the pastor of a local church, a man known in the community for his calm presence and kindness. He didn't come from wealth, but he had something that mattered even more. He had a heart that always noticed those in need. As he walked past a corner near the old park, he saw something that made him pause. There, huddled against a brick wall, was a young boy. The boy looked no older than 12, his clothes ragged and worn. He was shivering, trying to wrap his thin jacket around himself, and his shoes were far too small, letting the cold creep in. His eyes, wide and scared, darted around as though he feared being noticed. Yet at the same time, he seemed desperate for help. The pastor stopped a few steps away, his heart tightening. He had seen many people in need over the years, but something about this boy felt different. It wasn't just the obvious hunger or the cold. There was a deep loneliness there, an emptiness that tugged at the soul. He took a slow breath and approached him gently. "Hey there," the pastor said softly, crouching down to the boy's level. "Are you okay? Do you need some help?" The boy flinched, backing up slightly, his small hands clutching the edge of his jacket. I'm fine," he whispered, though his voice was shaky. The pastor shook his head, smiling gently. "I don't think you're fine. You're freezing out here. You can come with me for a little while. There's a warm place nearby and I can get you some food." The boy looked away as if measuring the risk. He had learned over the past few years that adults didn't always have good intentions. But something in the man's eyes, calm and kind, made him pause. He didn't look threatening. He didn't look angry or demanding. He just looked human, like someone who cared. "I can't," the boy said quietly, trying to sound firm. "That's okay," the pastor replied. "You don't have to decide right now, but I'll be right here if you want to come. No one should be out here alone in the cold." For a moment, the boy simply stared, teeth chattering slightly. The pastor noticed how small he seemed, almost swallowed by the big city around him. He knew he couldn't just leave the boy there. Not tonight. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wrapped sandwich and a bottle of water. "Here," he said, extending them carefully. "You don't have to come with me if you don't want to. Just eat something, all right?" The boy hesitated, then slowly took the food, his hands trembling. He didn't speak, just nodded slightly, eyes fixed on the sandwich. It wasn't much, but it was the first warmth he had felt in hours. The pastor didn't push further. He sat down on the curb a little distance away and watched quietly, giving the boy space but staying nearby. The night was silent except for distant car horns and the soft rustle of leaves in the cold wind. After a few minutes, the boy finally looked up. His eyes were wary, but there was a spark of curiosity too. Where would I go?" he asked cautiously. "There's a place not far from here," the pastor said. "It's safe, warm, and there are people who care. You can stay for a night or as long as you need. No one will bother you." The boy thought for a long time, chewing on the sandwich and staring at the pavement. He had been on the streets for months, maybe longer. Trust didn't come easy to him. Adults had promised things before and broken those promises. But hunger and cold were stronger than his fear tonight. Slowly he nodded. "Okay, maybe I'll go." The pastor smiled, standing up and extending his hand. "That's all I ask. Just come with me one step at a time." The boy took a deep breath, wiped his nose with the back of his sleeve, and took the man's hand. Together, they walked a few blocks to the church. From the outside, it looked ordinary, like any other building. But inside it was warm, filled with the scent of cooking food and soft light from lamps that made everything feel safe. The pastor led him to a small room with a cot, blankets, and a few basic supplies. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "I'll get you some dinner in a few minutes. And tomorrow, we'll figure out the next steps together. No rush, no pressure." The boy looked around cautiously. The room was simple, but it had a feeling he hadn't known in a long time. Safety. He sank onto the cot, pulling the thin blanket around him, and for the first time in a long while he allowed himself to relax a little. Dinner that night was quiet but warm. The pastor brought a plate of rice, vegetables, and a small piece of chicken. The boy ate slowly, still wary but with growing hunger and comfort. The pastor sat nearby, eating his own meal but mostly watching him. "Do you have a name?" the pastor asked gently after a while. The boy hesitated. "I don't know if it matters," he said. "It matters to me," the pastor replied, "and it will matter to the people here too. We all like knowing who we're helping. I'm just a boy," he muttered, embarrassed. "That's okay," the pastor said with a kind smile. "I'll call you whatever you want. We can start small. Just friend for tonight if you like." The boy managed a small, shy smile. "Friend, that's okay," he whispered. That night, the boy lay on the cot listening to the faint hum of the church around him. It was quiet but not empty. There were other people somewhere doing good, being kind. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. The pastor, sitting in a nearby chair, looked at him and thought about all the children in the world who ended up lost and alone. He knew this boy's story might not be easy. There would be challenges ahead, and the road would be long. But he also knew that one small act, offering shelter, food, and a listening ear, could make a world of difference. And tonight that was enough. Hours passed and the boy finally drifted into a deep sleep. The pastor quietly rose, tidied the room a little, and whispered a small prayer for him. May he find strength, may he find hope, and may he know he is never alone. As the pastor left the room, he paused at the door and looked back. The boy looked peaceful, his small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The pastor smiled softly. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew this. Sometimes, showing kindness was the first step in changing a life forever. And so, on that cold night in a quiet corner of the city, a homeless boy found shelter, warmth, and the first spark of hope he had felt in years. It was the beginning of a journey neither of them would forget. A journey of trust, care, and the quiet power of one person's willingness to help another. Little did either of them know, years from now the boy would return, carrying not only gratitude but a life transformed. But that was a story for another day. Tonight there was only warmth, only kindness, and the beginning of a bond that would change everything. The next morning, the boy woke to the soft rays of sunlight streaming through the small window of the room in the church. For the first time in months, he didn't feel the harsh chill of the streets. The blankets wrapped around him were warm and soft, and for a moment he just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange kind of peace he hadn't known in a long time. The pastor came quietly into the room, holding a tray with a simple breakfast, toast, fruit, and a glass of milk. "Good morning," he said gently. "I hope you slept well." The boy looked up, blinking. I slept okay," he muttered, still adjusting to the feeling of safety. "That's good," the pastor said, setting the tray on a small table by the bed. "Eat some breakfast. You'll need energy for the day." The boy hesitated, then slowly reached for the toast. Each bite felt strange yet comforting. For so long, food had been something to survive on, never something to enjoy. Now he could taste flavors and feel warmth spreading through his body. It was a small thing, but it mattered more than he could explain. After breakfast, the pastor guided him through the shelter. It wasn't large, but it was filled with life. There were a few other children staying temporarily, some adults volunteering, and small areas where people could read, pray, or just sit quietly. It wasn't fancy, but it was alive with kindness. "This is your new space," the pastor said softly. "You can stay here as long as you need. We'll help you with food, school, and anything else you might need, and we'll do it together." The boy nodded, looking around cautiously. He had never been in a place where people offered help freely, without expecting anything in return. It was hard to trust, but the warmth in the pastor's eyes made him believe just a little that maybe this time would be different. Over the next few days, the boy began adjusting to life at the shelter. It was not always easy. Waking up to a schedule, going to school again, and interacting with others was overwhelming at first. He had spent so long surviving on the streets that routines felt unfamiliar. At school, he struggled. He had missed months of classes and felt behind. Some children looked at him strangely, whispering, noticing his worn clothes and shy demeanor. It was painful and he wanted to retreat, but the pastor never let him give up. Every day he would check in, offering encouragement. "You're stronger than you think," the pastor said one morning, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have been through so much, but you are learning now. That's what matters. Keep trying, step by step." The boy nodded, a small spark of determination growing inside him. It was still hard, but he began to understand that someone believed in him. That belief became a tiny shield against the fear and doubt that had haunted him for so long. At the shelter, life had a rhythm. Meals were shared together, Chores were done, and sometimes the pastor would gather the children to read stories, sing songs, or simply talk. The boy watched carefully at first, unsure if he belonged. Slowly, he began participating. He laughed at the silly jokes, asked questions about the stories, and even helped with small tasks around the shelter. One afternoon, the pastor noticed the boy sitting quietly in a corner, drawing in a notebook he had found in the shelter. "What are you working on?" the pastor asked softly, sitting beside him. The boy hesitated, then showed him a rough sketch of a building, a tree, and a small boy standing outside. I like to draw," he whispered. "That's wonderful," the pastor said warmly. "You have a gift. You should keep practicing. One day you might create something that inspires others." The boy felt a small pride swelling in his chest. For the first time, he was being recognized for something other than his need or his past struggles. He felt seen, and it was a feeling he wanted to hold on to. Days turned into weeks, and the boy slowly began to grow. He learned to trust the pastor and the shelter. He made small friends with the other children, sharing stories and laughter. Even the little things, the pastor's gentle reminders, the warmth of a bed at night, the taste of hot soup, made a big difference. But life wasn't always easy. Sometimes memories of the streets haunted him. He remembered cold nights, hunger, and people who had hurt or ignored him. He would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, and the pastor would quietly come to his side. "It's okay," he would whisper. "You're safe now. You're not alone." These words became a lifeline for the boy. Slowly, he began to believe them, not just in his mind but in his heart. He realized that one person's kindness could make him feel human again. It wasn't just food or shelter. It was care, patience, and understanding that made him start to hope. The pastor also taught him small lessons about life. He showed him how to help others, how to be kind even when it was hard, and how to find hope in small victories. "Life is not always fair," the pastor said one afternoon while walking him to school. "But you have the choice to rise above it. Help others when you can, and never forget the goodness you receive." The boy listened carefully, absorbing every word. He didn't fully understand all of it yet, but the ideas planted seeds of change in him. He began helping younger children in the shelter, sharing food or comforting those who were afraid. Every small act gave him a sense of purpose he had never known on the streets. Slowly, the boy began to dream. Not big, impossible dreams, but small ones. Finishing school, learning to draw better, maybe even having a home that was truly his own someday. These dreams were fragile, but they were his first steps toward a new life. Even in moments of doubt, the pastor's steady presence was a guide. He never pressured the boy, never demanded more than he could give. Instead, he offered patience, wisdom, and encouragement. "You're doing better than you think," the pastor said one evening as they cleaned up the shelter together. "One day you'll see how far you've come." The boy nodded, tired but determined. He realized that kindness was not just something people gave you. It was something that grew inside when you believed in it and shared it with others. And the pastor's kindness had shown him that it was possible to trust again. One evening, the boy sat by the window looking out at the quiet street. The city seemed smaller somehow, less threatening. For the first time in a long while, he felt calm. He thought about his past, about the hardships and loneliness he had endured. But instead of despair, he felt a quiet strength building inside him. He knew that he wasn't alone anymore. He had a home, even if temporary. He had guidance, support, and someone who truly cared. The pastor came to check on him before bed. "Good night," he said softly, smiling. "Sleep well. Tomorrow is another day to grow and learn." The boy smiled back, a real smile this time. "Thank you," he whispered, the words carrying more weight than he realized. And in that moment, a bond was cemented. It was not just the bond of shelter and food, but the bond of trust, hope, and human kindness. The boy was no longer just surviving, he was starting to live. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The boy grew stronger, healthier, and more confident. He began excelling in school, slowly catching up on what he had missed. The other children at the shelter came to respect him, and he learned to respect himself. Each day, the pastor's guidance and patience helped him transform, teaching him not just survival but life itself. The boy started to understand the true meaning of gratitude. It was not just saying thank you, it was feeling it in your heart and letting it guide your actions. He found joy in helping, learning, and dreaming. And though the streets he had left behind still haunted him sometimes, they no longer defined him. The pastor often watched him quietly, a gentle pride in his eyes. He didn't need to say it aloud. The change was visible in every small gesture, every confident step the boy took. The boy's journey had only just begun, but the foundation was strong. And that foundation was built not with riches or power, but with patience, care, and unwavering kindness. It was in these simple, quiet days that the boy began to understand a truth he would carry forever. That one person's willingness to care, to shelter and to guide could change a life completely, and this truth, planted now, would one day grow into something far greater than either of them could imagine. Years had passed since the boy first found shelter at the pastor's home. Time moved quietly but steadily, and he was no longer the small, timid child huddled against a brick wall in the cold. He had grown taller, stronger, and more aware of the world around him. Yet growing up brought challenges that were far more complicated than hunger or cold. Life outside the streets had its own tests, and the boy had to learn how to navigate them. School remained a challenge. While he had made great progress catching up on years of missed lessons, he sometimes felt out of place. Some classmates whispered about his past, and others looked at him differently because of the way he spoke or dressed. These moments stung, and occasionally he wanted to retreat to the safety of the shelter, where judgment was replaced by patience. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult day at school, he sat alone under a large tree near the playground. The words of some children had hurt him deeply, and his self-confidence wavered. The pastor found him there, sitting quietly with his head down. "Hey," the pastor said softly, taking a seat beside him. "Tough day?" The boy didn't answer at first, just stared at the ground. He felt embarrassed and unsure. They make fun of me," he admitted finally, "because of where I came from." The pastor nodded, understanding the weight of the words. "I know it's not easy," he said. "People often judge what they don't understand, but you know your worth. And that matters far more than their opinions. What they say does not define you. Your actions, your choices, and your heart define you." The boy looked up, meeting the pastor's eyes. There was a calmness there, a steady assurance that comforted him. "But sometimes it feels like I'll never fit in," he said softly. "You don't need to fit in," the pastor replied. "You need to find your path, your place where you can grow and be happy. Fitting in comes later naturally when you are confident in who you are." Those words stayed with the boy. He realized that he didn't have to change who he was to be accepted. He could keep his past, his scars, and still move forward. Life at the shelter continued to teach him lessons, both big and small. He learned responsibility by helping with chores, cleaning, and cooking small meals. He discovered patience by assisting younger children, some of whom were afraid or shy, reminding him of himself years ago. And he discovered joy in small victories, finishing a difficult homework assignment, drawing a picture he was proud of, or making a friend smile. Yet growing up also brought moments of doubt. He sometimes wondered if he was truly capable of success outside the shelter, in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. One evening he stayed up late staring at the ceiling, thinking about the future. The pastor noticed and sat beside him quietly. "What's on your mind?" he asked. "I don't know if I can do it," the boy admitted. "The world outside."
"What if I fail?"
The pastor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You might stumble," he said. "Everyone does. But the important thing is to keep moving forward, to learn from mistakes and to remember that you are not alone. You have strength, and you have the lessons you've learned here. That foundation will carry you further than you realize." The boy nodded slowly, taking in the pastor's words. He understood that growth wasn't just about strength or skill. It was about resilience, learning from hardship, and holding on to hope even when things seemed impossible. Over the next months, he began to explore his own interests more deeply. He spent hours drawing, sketching small scenes from the shelter, the city, and sometimes imaginary worlds. He discovered a love for learning, reading books, and asking questions about the world. The pastor encouraged this, often bringing him books or discussing ideas late into the evenings. "You have a mind that wants to explore," the pastor said one night. "Don't let it go to waste. Knowledge and understanding are powerful tools. They can guide you, protect you, and help you help others." The boy listened carefully. He began to see learning not as a chore, but as a way to grow, a way to prepare for a future that had once seemed impossible. But growing up was not without conflict. There were times when the boy felt anger, frustration, or fear. Sometimes the memories of the streets, cold nights, hunger, and loneliness would rush back, making him feel small again. Other times he would argue with peers or feel jealousy toward children who seemed to have everything he had ever lacked. Through all of this, the pastor remained a steady guide. He didn't scold harshly or punish. Instead, he offered understanding, teaching the boy to channel his emotions constructively. Feelings are natural, he explained one afternoon. It's what you do with them that matters. You can let them control you, or you can learn from them and grow stronger. The boy began to apply this lesson in small ways. When he felt angry, he would draw, write, or take a walk. When he felt lonely, he would help someone else, sharing food or offering a comforting word. Slowly, he learned that his past, though painful, could become a source of strength rather than shame. Friendships at the shelter grew too. He learned to trust others, to cooperate, and to care for people who were different from him. There were moments of laughter, small games, and shared stories that made him feel part of a family. These experiences taught him empathy, patience, and the joy of giving, lessons that would stay with him for the rest of his life. One winter evening, the shelter faced a challenge. A storm had blown in, leaving roads blocked and the heating struggling to keep up. The children were frightened, the youngest huddled in corners and the older ones anxious. The boy took it upon himself to help, moving blankets, distributing food, and comforting those around him. The pastor watched, pride swelling in his heart. "You're becoming a leader," he said quietly to himself, "not because you seek it, but because you care." That night after the storm passed, the boy sat by the fire, reflecting on how far he had come. He remembered the cold streets, the nights of fear, the hunger and loneliness. And yet here he was, safe, warm, and useful. He realized that his past had shaped him, but it did not define him. He had choices now, choices to grow, to help, and to be the person he wanted to become. The bond between the pastor and the boy deepened as well. They were more than teacher and student or caregiver and child. They had become family in the truest sense, a relationship built on trust, respect, and unconditional care. The pastor had given the boy a chance to see life differently, to believe in goodness and to find hope when it seemed impossible. The boy began to think about the future more seriously. What would he do after leaving the shelter? Could he survive and succeed on his own? These questions both excited and frightened him. But he knew one thing for certain. He wanted to make the pastor proud, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude and love. One evening, as they walked together through the quiet streets after a long day, the boy finally spoke his thoughts aloud. "I want to do something good with my life," he said. "Something that matters, like you have done for me." The pastor smiled, a warmth in his eyes. "That's the right thought," he said. "Remember, it doesn't have to be big at first. Small acts of kindness, helping one person at a time, that's how lives are changed. And someday you may help many, just like someone helped you." The boy nodded, feeling a sense of purpose he had never known before. He realized that his experiences, both painful and joyful, had prepared him to be strong, compassionate, and determined. Life continued in this rhythm, learning, growing, and facing challenges. There were days of doubt, moments of fear, and struggles that seemed overwhelming. But each time, the boy found strength in the pastor's guidance, the shelter's support, and the small victories he achieved every day. By the time he reached his late teens, he had transformed completely. No longer just a boy seeking refuge, he had become a young man capable of resilience, empathy, and leadership. He had learned that kindness could change lives, that hope could be nurtured even in the darkest times, and that one person's guidance could shape a future in ways unimaginable. Yet, the boy never forgot where he had come from. The streets, the cold nights, and the fear were etched in his memory, reminding him to remain humble, compassionate, and grateful. And deep down he carried a quiet, persistent thought. One day he wanted to give back, to repay the kindness that had saved him when he was at his lowest, and so, with each passing day he grew, not just in age, but in heart, mind, and spirit. The shelter had become a place of transformation, the pastor a beacon of hope, and the boy himself a testament to the quiet power of care, patience, and love. Little did either of them know, the challenges of the world outside were still waiting. But the boy was ready now. He had learned to face fear, to trust and to grow, and one day that readiness would lead him back, not as a boy in need, but as a young man ready to repay the kindness that had changed his life forever. The boy had grown into a young man now, strong, capable, and confident in ways he never thought possible years ago. He had learned so much at the shelter, not just about school and skills, but about life itself. He had learned to care for others, to be patient, to face fear, and to find hope even in the darkest times. But now a new chapter was waiting, a chapter where he would leave the shelter and step into the wider world on his own. The thought both excited and frightened him. He knew the world outside was not always kind. People could be harsh and life could be unfair. But he also knew that staying in the shelter forever was not the path he was meant to take. He had grown too much, learned too much, and he had dreams that required him to step forward. The pastor noticed the change in him too. He could see the determination in the young man's eyes, the quiet readiness to take the lessons he had learned and apply them in the real world. "It's time," the pastor said one evening as they sat on a bench outside the shelter, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You're ready to step out. I know it's scary, but you have the strength, the skills, and the heart to face it." The young man nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and fear. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything out there," he admitted. "It's a big world. I've been safe here for so long." "I understand," the pastor replied softly. "Leaving comfort is always hard. But comfort is not the same as growth. You've learned, you've grown, and now it's time to use that strength. Remember, you carry what you've learned here with you. That can never be taken away." Over the next few weeks, preparations began. The pastor helped the young man look for a small apartment, taught him how to manage money, and guided him in finding a job that would support him. They went over resumes, practiced interviews, and discussed the responsibilities of living independently. Every step was new, sometimes overwhelming, but the young man faced it all with determination. Even as he prepared to leave, he did not forget the shelter and the people who had become like family. He helped organize meals, assisted younger children with their homework, and shared his experiences to encourage them. He realized that giving back even in small ways was part of the responsibility he now carried. The day of departure finally arrived. The young man packed his few belongings, feeling a strange mix of excitement, nervousness, and sadness. The shelter had been his home for so many years, and leaving it felt like leaving a part of himself behind. The pastor helped him carry the last boxes to the car. They stood together for a moment, neither speaking. Words felt inadequate for the depth of the emotions they both felt. The young man finally broke the silence. "Thank you for everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know where I would be without you." The pastor smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You've grown because of your own heart and courage. I only helped you see it. Now go out there and live the life you've been preparing for. And remember, no matter what happens, you are never alone." With that, the young man climbed into the car, glancing back one last time at the shelter. He saw the familiar lights, the warm rooms, and the people who had nurtured him. A sense of nostalgia and gratitude filled him. But he also felt the pull of the future, the unknown world waiting for him, full of challenges and possibilities. The first few days outside the shelter were difficult. Simple tasks he had taken for granted, like cooking for himself, paying bills, and navigating public transportation, were challenging. At work, he encountered colleagues who were unkind or dismissive. There were moments when he felt overwhelmed, wondering if he had made a mistake leaving the safety of the shelter. But each time he stumbled, he remembered the lessons the pastor had taught him. He remembered the patience, resilience, and hope that had carried him through the hardest times. He learned to face difficulties with calmness and to approach problems one step at a time. Slowly, he adapted, gaining confidence with every success. The young man also began saving money, planning for a future that included stability, education, and even helping others who might be in need one day. He never forgot the gratitude he felt for the pastor, and he quietly dreamed of a day when he could give back in a meaningful way. Despite the challenges, he found small joys in life. Walking through the city streets, he noticed people he could help. sometimes just a smile, a conversation, or small acts of kindness. Each of these moments reminded him of the shelter, the pastor, and the power of compassion. He realized that even in a busy, harsh world, small actions could make a difference, just as they had made a difference in his own life. Time passed, and the young man continued to grow. He became more independent, skilled, and confident. He made friends, formed routines, and began to envision a future where he could make a lasting impact. And through it all, the memory of the pastor's unwavering kindness remained a guiding light. One evening, after a long day at work, he returned to his small apartment and reflected on his journey. From the cold streets to the shelter, from fear and uncertainty to hope and growth, he had come a long way, and he realized something important. He owed the person who had believed in him the most, who had given him a chance when no one else would. The young man began to plan. He wanted to show the pastor that his guidance, care, and kindness had not been forgotten. He didn't know exactly how he would do it yet, but he knew he wanted to make a difference, just as the pastor had made a difference in his life. Over the next months, he worked hard, saving, learning, and preparing. Every success, every achievement was fueled by the memory of that first night when the pastor had taken him in. He remembered the warmth of the room, the kindness in the pastor's eyes, and the feeling of being safe for the first time in his life. That memory became his motivation, pushing him to grow and succeed. He also stayed in touch with the shelter, occasionally visiting and offering help where he could. He realized that leaving didn't mean forgetting. It meant taking the lessons he had learned and applying them in the wider world. He wanted to build a life that honored the care he had received. One weekend, he visited the pastor, who greeted him warmly. They sat together, sharing a meal and talking about life. The pastor listened with pride as the young man spoke of his progress, his struggles, and his dreams. "I knew you could do it," the pastor said softly. "I only hoped you would, and you have surpassed even my expectations." The young man smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without you," he said. "Everything I've learned, every bit of courage comes from you. You gave me a chance when no one else would. I want to repay that someday." The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling warmly. "You don't need to repay me," he said. "You've already shown that by living a good life, helping others, and being kind. That is repayment enough. But I know your heart, and someday you'll do something meaningful. I have faith in that." That evening, as the young man left, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world outside the shelter was challenging, yes, but it was also full of opportunities to do good, to help, and to grow. And he was ready. He carried with him the lessons, love, and guidance that had shaped him into the person he had become. He began to dream bigger, not for himself alone, but for others. He thought of children on the streets, people struggling to survive, and those who needed a chance just as he had. He wanted to create opportunities, extend kindness, and make the world a little better. And through it all, the pastor remained a guiding presence in his life, a reminder that even the smallest acts of care could create ripples that lasted a lifetime. The young man had left the shelter, but he had not left the values, lessons, and love that had been instilled in him there. The journey ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges, choices, and the unknown. But the young man no longer feared it. He was prepared not just by skill or knowledge, but by heart. He had learned that kindness, patience, and perseverance were more powerful than any obstacle. And so, as he stepped further into the world, he carried with him a mission that had begun on that cold night years ago. The desire to live a life that mattered, to honor the care he had received, and to one day return the kindness that had changed everything. Years had passed since the young man had left the shelter. Life outside had not been easy, but he had worked hard, stayed focused, and applied every lesson the pastor had taught him. Slowly, step by step, he built a life of stability. He found a good job, made trustworthy friends, and even rented a small apartment that felt like home. Every achievement was a reminder of the guidance and kindness that had shaped him, and every challenge strengthened the resilience he had developed in the shelter. Yet, despite his progress, one thought remained constantly in his heart. He wanted to repay the pastor, the man who had saved him when he had nothing. He had thought about this for years, wondering how he could ever express the gratitude he felt. Words seemed too small, gifts seemed inadequate, and yet he knew he had to try. One weekend, he decided it was time. He planned a visit to the pastor, carrying with him not just gifts or money but a heart full of gratitude and a desire to give back. The journey to the church brought back memories of the first night he had arrived, cold, scared, and unsure of what the future held. Now he approached the same doors as a man who had faced the world, struggled and grown stronger because of the chance the pastor had given him. As he entered the church, he saw the familiar warmth, the soft light, and the sense of community that had always made the place feel like home. The pastor was in the common room, organizing some supplies and talking quietly with a few children who had come for help. The young man paused for a moment, taking it all in. The sight of the shelter, unchanged in its purpose, filled him with emotion. "Hello?" the young man said softly, stepping forward. The pastor looked up, and his face lit up with recognition and surprise. It's you!" he exclaimed. "I can hardly believe it. Look at you. You've grown into a fine young man." The young man smiled, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I've come to say thank you," he said, his voice steady but full of feeling, "for everything you did for me all those years ago. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You believed in me, and I've never forgotten it." The pastor's eyes softened, and he gestured for the young man to sit. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Seeing you grow and succeed is thanks enough. That was always the hope, that you would find your path." "I want to do more than just say thank you," the young man replied. "I want to give back. I want to help others just like you helped me. I want to make a difference here." The pastor looked at him, surprised and deeply moved. "That is a wonderful thought," he said. "But you don't have to do it alone. Come, show me what you have in mind." The young man explained his plan. He had been saving money from his job, learning about non-profit work and thinking carefully about how he could support the shelter. He wanted to help renovate some rooms, provide better supplies, and even start a small program to help other children who were living on the streets, just like he had been. The pastor listened quietly, a gentle smile forming on his face. "You've thought this through," he said, "and I can see that your heart is in the right place. This is exactly the kind of work that can change lives. You are turning your gratitude into action, and that is the most powerful form of repayment." Over the next few days, the young man worked closely with the pastor and the shelter team. He helped organize donations, clean and repaint rooms, and set up areas for learning and recreation. Children at the shelter watched him with curiosity and admiration, seeing someone who had been in their shoes now giving back and guiding them. As he worked, the young man reflected on his journey. He remembered the cold nights, the hunger, and the fear he had once known. He remembered the doubts, the loneliness, and the moments when it seemed like no one cared. And then he remembered the warmth, the food, the safety, and the patience of the pastor who had taken him in. Each memory was a reminder of why he was doing this work and why it mattered so deeply. The pastor watched him, quietly proud. "You have taken what you have learned and turned it into something meaningful," he said one afternoon. "That is the mark of true growth. Not just surviving, but using your experience to help others." The young man smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "I never want anyone to feel as hopeless as I once did," he said. "If I can help even one child, it will be worth it. And maybe someday they will help someone else and the kindness will continue." The shelter transformed under his efforts. New learning materials were provided, the rooms were brighter and more welcoming, and the children had more opportunities to engage in activities that encouraged creativity and growth. The young man also introduced small mentorship sessions, sharing his story with the children and teaching them practical skills, hope, and resilience. One day, while organizing a group of children, the young man noticed a small boy sitting quietly in a corner looking nervous and scared. The sight reminded him of himself years ago, huddled against a wall unsure of what the future held. He walked over, knelt down, and spoke softly. "Hey there," he said gently. "Do you want to join us? It's okay if you're scared. I've been where you are and I know it's not easy, but you're safe here and we'll help you." The boy looked up, eyes wide with fear and hesitation, but slowly he nodded, taking the young man's hand. The young man smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of trust forming, just as it had for him so many years ago.